In chemistry, a reaction only happens when the conditions are right. It's no different in real estate. Welcome to the Alkaline Reaction, a podcast from Alkaline Advisors, where we break down the deals, partners, and capital structures that turn opportunities into outcomes. I'm Spencer Correnti, and today's reaction: city planning and entitlements. Developers may have ideas for buildings. Architects may design them. Investors may provide capital. But ultimately, cities decide what gets built. Local governments regulate land use through zoning codes, planning policies, and approval processes. These rules determine what types of buildings can be constructed, where they can be built, and how large or dense they can become. In many ways, the entitlement process acts as the gatekeeper of real estate development. So, today we're going to walk through how that process works and why it is so important. We'll start by discussing the role of zoning and city planning in shaping development. Then we'll look at the entitlement process itself, how developers secure the approvals required to move forward with a project. After that, we'll talk about community engagement and political dynamics, which often influence development decisions. And finally, we'll discuss how entitlements affect project risk, timelines, and ultimately the economics of real estate development. To understand entitlements, it helps to step back and look at how cities manage land use. Cities are complex systems. They must balance housing needs, transportation infrastructure, economic development, environmental sustainability, and community character. To manage these competing priorities, municipalities establish zoning regulations that govern how land can be used. Zoning codes typically define several key parameters. They determine what types of uses are allowed on a property, such as residential, office, retail, or industrial. They control building height, density, and floor area ratios. They regulate setbacks from property lines, parking requirements, and sometimes architectural standards. These rules collectively shape the physical form of cities. For example, a zoning code might allow a 6-story residential building on one block, but limit nearby parcels to 3-story townhouses. Another district might permit high-density office towers near transit hubs while restricting development in historic neighborhoods. When developers evaluate a potential project, one of the first questions they ask is whether the proposed development complies with existing zoning. If it does, the project may proceed through a relatively straightforward approval process, but many development projects require some form of zoning modification or discretionary approval. This is where the entitlement process begins. The entitlement process refers to the series of approvals developers must obtain from local governments before construction can begin. Depending on the jurisdiction and the complexity of the project, this process can involve multiple agencies and regulatory bodies. Developers may need approvals from planning departments, zoning boards, environmental review boards, design review commissions, or city councils. Each of these entities evaluates different aspects of the project. Planning departments typically review whether the development aligns with long-term planning goals for the city. Zoning boards evaluate requests for variances or modifications to zoning regulations. Environmental agencies may assess impacts related to traffic, noise, air quality, or infrastructure capacity. In some cases, projects must also comply with regional or state-level environmental review processes. For developers, navigating this process requires careful coordination between architects, planners, attorneys, and consultants. The development team prepares site plans, architectural drawings, traffic studies, environmental analyses, and other technical documents required by regulators. These materials help demonstrate that the project meets safety standards, complies with regulations, and contributes positively to the surrounding community. But entitlements are not purely technical. They are also political. Most jurisdictions require public hearings as part of the approval process. During these hearings, community members, neighborhood groups, and local stakeholders have the opportunity to comment on proposed developments. Supporters may highlight economic benefits such as job creation, housing supply, or new amenities. Opponents may raise concerns about traffic congestion, building height, neighborhood character, or environmental impacts. Because local elected officials often play a role in approving projects, developers must consider political dynamics alongside technical requirements. Successful entitlement strategies often involve early engagement with community groups, thoughtful project design, and clear communication about the benefits of the development. This aspect of development is sometimes overlooked by outsiders, but experienced developers understand that projects are far more likely to succeed when they align with both regulatory frameworks and community priorities. From an investment perspective, the entitlement process represents one of the most important and sometimes unpredictable stages of development. Unlike construction costs or architectural design, which can be estimated with relative precision, entitlement outcomes are influenced by regulatory interpretation, community response, and political considerations. As a result, entitlement risk is one of the key variables investors evaluate when considering development opportunities. Projects that already have zoning approvals in place typically carry less risk and may command higher land prices. Conversely, projects that require rezoning or complex approvals may offer greater upside, but also involve more uncertainty and longer timelines. In some markets, securing entitlements can take several months. In others, the process can take several years. During that time, developers must continue funding design work, consulting studies, legal expenses, and land carrying costs while waiting for approvals. Delays can affect financing structures, construction schedules, and overall project feasibility. This is why experienced development teams often spend significant time analyzing zoning regulations and entitlement requirements before acquiring a property. They evaluate not just what is legally allowed today, but also what might be achievable through the entitlement process. In many ways, this stage of development is where strategy, planning, and risk management converge. If we step back and look at the broader development ecosystem, city planning and entitlements play a central role in shaping the built environment. They determine where housing can be constructed, where businesses can operate, and how cities evolve over time. For developers and investors, understanding this process is essential, not just because it determines whether a project can move forward, but because it directly affects development timelines, risk profiles, and ultimately financial returns. In other words, before architects design buildings, before engineers calculate structural loads, and before contractors break ground, there is one fundamental question that must be answered. Will the city approve the project? That question sits at the heart of the entitlement process, and in many ways, it is the point where ideas about development meet the realities of regulation, politics, and urban planning. That's today's reaction. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe and join us next time as we continue breaking down the commercial real estate industry. I'm Spencer Carenti, and thank you for your time.